Today, we are going to learn something very interesting and very important: the early methods of food preservation. Now, before we dive into it, let me ask you, have you ever wondered how people long ago, before refrigerators, freezers, or modern technology, managed to keep their food fresh and safe to eat? Well, food preservation has been part of human life for thousands of years. Without it, people would not have survived because food goes bad very quickly if it is not preserved. So let's take a journey back in time and learn the methods our ancestors used to keep their food safe for days, weeks, or even months. 1. Drying. One of the oldest and simplest methods is drying. This is where people remove water from food because water makes food spoil faster. Early people would spread grains, fruits, vegetables, and even fish and meat under the sun to dry. In hot regions, the sun was enough to dry food completely. By removing the moisture, bacteria and fungi could not grow easily. That's why dried maize, beans, fish, and even fruits like mangoes could last a long time. 2. Smoking. Another common method was smoking. Have you ever smelled smoked fish or meat? Delicious, right? People would hang fish, meat, or even roots above a fire. The smoke not only dried the food but also added special chemicals from the wood that acted as preservatives. Smoking also gave food a unique flavor and helped keep away insects. This method was very important for communities living near lakes, rivers, and forests because they had plenty of fish and wild game to preserve. 3. Salting. Then we have salting. Salt is a natural preservative. It removes water from food and makes it difficult for bacteria to survive. People would rub salt on meat or fish. Salted meat and salted fish could last for months, especially during long journeys or in times of war. Many coastal communities used this method because salt was available from the sea. 4. Natural cooling and freezing. Even before electric fridges, people in cold regions had a way of keeping food fresh. They used ice and snow. In very cold places, food was buried in the snow or stored in ice houses. The low temperature slowed down bacteria growth and kept food fresh for longer. 5. Fermentation. Another clever method is fermentation. This is when people use natural microorganisms to change food into a form that lasts longer. For example, milk was turned into cheese or fermented milk, also called mala in Swahili. Grains were made into porridge. Cabbage and other vegetables could be fermented into pickles. Fermentation not only preserved food but also made it more nutritious and easier to digest. 6. Boiling. Boiling food was also a method of preservation. By boiling water, milk, or soup, germs were killed, and food could stay safe for a little longer. Some communities boiled milk daily to keep it from going sour. Others boiled herbs and grains to prepare them for storage. Although boiling only preserved food for a short time, it was still useful. 7. Storage in ash, sand, and earthen pots. In some areas, people used natural storage methods. Grains were stored in dry pots or buried in ash to keep insects away. Root crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, and yams were stored in pits covered with sand or soil to keep them fresh. Earthen pots kept water and milk cool, delaying spoilage. This was simple but very effective. 8. Spices and herbs. Some communities discovered that certain spices and herbs could help preserve food. Ginger, garlic, pepper, and cloves were used to keep meat and sauces fresh. These natural preservatives also added flavor to the food. Importance of food preservation. Now learner, why was food preservation so important in the early days? It prevented food from going bad and reduced wastage. It ensured there was food during times of famine or drought. It made it possible to travel long distances with food. It allowed people to trade preserved food with others. It gave variety to the diet because preserved food could be enjoyed out of season. So, learner, we have learned that long before fridges, people were very creative. They used drying, smoking, salting, freezing, fermentation, boiling, natural storage, and even spices to make food last longer. Next time you see dried fish or even salted meat, remember, you are actually eating food preserved using methods discovered thousands of years ago. Alright, now that we have learned about the early methods of preserving food, let's go one step further and talk about where those foods were stored after preservation. Because it was not enough to just dry or salt food, people also needed safe places to keep it. So let's look at the different storage places and containers used in early times. 1. Granaries. One of the most common storage structures was the granary. Granaries were raised houses or baskets made of sticks, grass, or mud built above the ground on stilts. Why above the ground? To keep away rats, termites, and floods. They stored dried grains like maize, millet, sorghum, and beans inside these granaries. Some granaries were plastered with cow dung and mud to make them airtight, keeping out moisture and pests. Granaries ensured that families had food reserves during famine or dry seasons. 2. Earthen pots and gourds. Another common method was using earthen pots or gourds. Milk, water, honey, and even oil were stored in pots or gourds. Earthen pots kept food cool because they allowed slow evaporation. Milk stored in gourds often developed a sour taste, which helped preserve it for longer. This was especially common among pastoralist communities. 3. Underground pits and silos. Some communities preserved food by digging underground pits or silos. Root crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, and yams were buried underground and covered with leaves or soil. In some areas, cereals were stored in pits lined with ash to repel insects. Underground pits were naturally cool and dark, which slowed down spoilage. This was an effective way to store food for several months. 4. Baskets. Food like beans, groundnuts, and maize was also stored in woven baskets made from plant fibers. The baskets were sometimes lined with leaves or cow dung to keep pests away. These were portable, so people could carry preserved food when traveling or migrating. 5. Smoked huts or smoke houses. For communities that relied on fish and meat, special huts called smoke houses were built. These were small shelters where food was hung above a slow fire. The smoke preserved the food while the hut kept it safe from rain and animals. Smoked fish or meat could then be stored for many weeks inside these huts. 6. Horns. In some traditional societies, horns were used as storage containers. Fat, honey, oil, and even seeds for planting could be kept in clean horns. They were durable and kept food safe for long journeys. Importance of storage places. Now, learner, why was it important to have these special storage places? To protect food from pests like rats and weevils. To prevent spoilage by keeping out moisture. To save food for use during famine, war, or long journeys. To make trade easier, since preserved food could be transported safely. To ensure that food lasted beyond the harvest season. So, as we can see, food preservation was not just about the method, it was also about where the food was kept. Granaries, pots, gourds, pits, baskets, and even smoke huts all played a big role in ensuring that families and communities never went hungry. This shows us just how wise and resourceful our ancestors were. They understood nature and used it to protect their food. That brings us to the end of today's lesson. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more lessons.